Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the 97th Academy Awards, the 2025 Oscars. I've been recently sharing my thoughts each year, and although I know I predominantly cover music on this channel, I also am trying to slowly talk more about TV and film. And the Oscars is kind of like in pop culture, the pop culture calendar, like one of my favorite nights. It is my Super Bowl. More so than even the Grammys. I actually didn't make a video on the Grammys this year. I was originally thinking I would, but I was actually pretty happy with a lot of the choices that were made at the Grammys this year. I was so happy that Beyonce finally got her long deserved Album of the Year win for Cowboy Carter. Um, but outside of that, I didn't feel like I had that much to say. I honestly feel like I would have just been saying, good for the winners, and that would have been the video. So I wanted to give a shout out to that, but I definitely knew I wanted to cover the Oscars. I feel like more people watch the Oscars. I'm more into movies, and especially in awards kind of settings. I feel like music, it's like there's just so much music that's really kind of frustrating to me to see like only a couple songs getting celebrated when there's just so much music that's out there. Whereas there are a lot of films out there, but films are a slightly meatier piece of art than like a 3-minute song, or even an album to a certain extent. I mean, that's not a shade to music. I'm just saying, films have, I don't know, a monumentality to them, which makes celebrating them at award shows just a little more interesting to me. I don't know why it is. It's just why it is. It's the way it is. I don't know. I feel like the Grammys piss me off more in general than the Oscars do, because the Grammys tastes are so, yeah. Anyway, let's get into this. I have unfortunately cannot say that I have seen all 10 Best Picture nominees going into this video. I really wish I could have the discretionary income to see all of these movies in theaters. And if I were to see all of these movies before the Oscars, I would have to see most of them in theaters. So a lot of them are available for digital renting, but it's a pretty high price point right now. And as someone who has a lot of streaming services, who pays for a lot of streaming services without ads, as a financial, method that's financially feasible for me to see a lot of movies for a reasonable price point, I am waiting until the streaming release of a lot of films that I have not seen, which I know as a cinephile, that might be a little bit like, oh, streaming. Sean Baker would be very mad at me. But you know what? I promise you, Sean, I went and saw Wicked. I saw Dune 2. I saw Heretic. I saw Nosferatu. I saw movies that I was like, I have to see in theaters. Movies like Anora, I can wait until it's streaming on Hulu. March 14th. I am going to be set. I'm so excited to see that movie because I have heard so much about it since Cannes when it won the Palme d'Or, and I've just been like, what is everyone talking about? And so I know that it's understandable if you're a little frustrated, like, why am I making a video about the Oscars if I haven't seen all of the Best Picture nominees? I'm trying my best. I have seen 5 of them. So the 5 that I have seen, it's 50%. I feel like that's the threshold that I can qualify. I really do feel like maybe 1 or 2 more of these films should have been on a streaming service before the Oscars. I was really happy last year when Searchlight put out Poor Things like 2 days before the ceremony. And I was like, yes, I get to see Poor Things in time for the ceremony. I was really hoping they'd do that with Anora. But that's Neon, and I think Neon is putting it out at a similar time that they put out Anatomy of a Fall, which was like mid-March. So you start to see these patterns. But yes, I am very excited to see the movies that I have not seen, The Brutalist in particular. I had originally thought that was going to be a frontrunner, but I knew that Anora was undeniable, and I never fully doubted it, even though it looked like Anora was maybe falling off after the Golden Globes. It's been a strange award season. I do try and keep up with, the Golden Globes, the SAG Awards, Critics' Choice, BAFTA. It's a lot. I mean, if you think, the Grammys is just like really just one event for, the industry. There are some critics groups that do in the music industry their own awards, but the film award scene is insane. You've got PGA and DGA and WGA and ASC, and the Annie Awards and the Indie Spirit Awards, and it's just, I mean, Critics' Choice. It's a lot. So keeping up with all of that is kind of a bit of a hoot. And the people who do all of the sort of like stat research about if they win this precursor, then they're more likely to get the Oscar. I mean, it's really interesting. It's a fun numbers game, but it can make you go a little crazy. But that being said, I do think that this year was not as predictable going in as last year. I think last year Oppenheimer was such a clear frontrunner. But I do feel like maybe this year, I had thought maybe at one point when Anora was really starting to show weakness after the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice, even to a certain extent, and especially, and it didn't do that well at the SAG Awards. I thought maybe this race was going to be a little bit more like, I don't know, is it Conclave? Is it The Brutalist still? We got to talk about Emilia Perez, which is unfortunately the ugly elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. That if you watched my video I made about every movie I watched in 2024, I do at length talk about Emilia Perez. I saw it last November. And when I watched it, I will say it was not under the heat of controversy that ensued. I watched it not long after it came to Netflix. And at that point, not a lot of people knew about it because it wasn't getting all these nominations. And of course, the 13 Oscar noms that we ended up seeing for it, that is always going to be something the Academy is going to have to face the music on. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's a real issue with the general public being like, there's a reason your ratings are going down if you pull this kind of chicanery. However, I also do not want Emilia Perez to be used as a scapegoat to sort of give this narrative that the Oscars are constantly awarding pretentious movies that no one sees and we should be, favoring popularity and box office. No. I've been seeing those takes. That is not what the Oscars should be about. I would love to see big budget crowd pleasers get big awards. My favorite movie, one of my favorite movies of all time, is The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King, which absolutely swept with 11 Oscar wins. And that also had a monumental box office. I really would like to see that, and it does happen occasionally, but Oppenheimer was actually pretty close to that. It was almost $1 billion and won Best Picture. But it's not going to be like that all the time. And there's a lot of factors that come into the conversation around the types of films that we're seeing being awarded compared to films in the past. There have always been more art house indie films being highlighted by the Oscars. I just think that the general public was more open to seeing anything in a movie theater back in the 90s when it was not nearly as expensive to do so. And there wasn't something called streaming, which makes now at-home viewing of anything so much more appealing, especially since it's probably going to come to a streaming service in several months. So theaters are going through it. And I do love what Sean Baker said about that. We'll talk about that when we get to his win. But to precursor this, yes, I'll touch more on the Emilia Perez mess as we go through this. I have seen it. I had to revise my feelings about the film. I didn't love the film when I first saw it, but I'll be honest with you, I kind of was entertained. It was not the worst movie I've ever seen. As a Best Picture nominee, probably one of the worst Best Picture nominees I've ever seen. But as a movie, just a general movie, if it hadn't had all that attached to it, I would have actually kind of been like, that was kind of entertaining. I was kind of gripped by this. And the cinematography wasn't too bad. And, Zoe Saldana wasn't terrible as what is really a lead actress role. Not a supporting, but, there's always that kind of mess going on with those categories. There's a lot of things that we could pick apart about how the Oscars are ran. But with all that being said, thankfully, evil was defeated. Well, almost, but pretty much. Emilia Perez only went away with 2 wins, which we kind of assumed was going to happen. We knew that they were going to take Song. We knew that Zoe Saldana was a shoo-in. She had won every precursor. So, I don't know. We're left with Anora, and how do I feel about it? Well, I need to see the movie, but I do have some thoughts, and I'll talk about it when I get to Best Picture. But overall, I did enjoy the ceremony, and I do think that we have an interesting crop of nominees. I actually do plan on seeing all 10 of them. Last year, I ended up seeing 9 out of the 10 Best Picture nominees. I did not see Past Lives. I still have not seen it. I know, you're going to come for me. I still may see it. It's not that I don't want to see it, it's just not high on my list. I talk about it in my, Oscars video last year. Past Lives just does not look interesting to me because it's a hetero romance, and those kind of movies, no matter how well made they are, can be a little bit like boring to me. I just have a hard time getting into them, unless it's a queer story. Like, I just get really bored with seeing heterosexual couples fall in love, and that's a movie. It's kind of like I need a little bit more to the story. So I know there is layers of it about, generate. Anyway, this isn't just talk about that. That's the one movie I didn't see from the Best Picture lineup last year. Of course, I didn't get to see all of them before the ceremony either because I was waiting for streaming releases of a lot of them. But without further ado, let's get into the ceremony and recap it. We open with an homage to Wicked, and I didn't even think that Ariana was going to perform the Wizard of Oz song Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But when that started, which I unfortunately did miss when I was trying to watch the Oscars on Hulu, which, as advertised, was supposed to be streaming the event, we couldn't find a link to it anywhere on Hulu. And I thought, I have to have Hulu Live, and I don't have that, which ended up working out just fine. Apparently, Hulu didn't start working for people until like 20 minutes into the broadcast, and then it cut off right at 10:30 because the Oscars always go long. It went till almost 11 o'clock. And so they missed the very end and the very beginning of the ceremony. So that Hulu really dropped the ball on that. That's really unfortunate. We can't be having that going forward. This was the first time that Hulu was going to be live streaming the Oscars like this. And so it's a shame that they can't get it right yet. But I did miss Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Initially, I had to go back and watch it. When I tuned in, she was covering the Diana Ross song from The Wiz. I am not at all familiar with The Wiz, so that song and that performance didn't do as much for me. But then, of course, Defying Gravity, the moment we were all waiting for, was a truly spectacular performance. They sound exactly like they do in the studio cut. It almost makes you think they're lip syncing, but they're not. They are that good. I mean, it really goes to show just how well suited as singers they were for those roles. So it was truly a delight, and that was one of the best Oscar openings I think I've ever seen. That opening with Ariana singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I believe that she sang that song for the Manchester show, and it was kind of meant to be a symbolic gesture for that originally when she would perform it on tour. So there's a lot of emotional connotation to that performance for her personally based on her own past experiences. But also when you consider the trajectory, it's The Wizard of Oz, then The Wiz, and then Wicked. It's the Ozian universe depicted 3 songs from each of those iconic adaptions. I thought that was a great way to, some people wanted more Wicked songs. I can understand. It would have been nice to see a couple others, but, I knew they were only going to do a handful because they only have so much time. And then we have Conan O'Brien, the first time he's ever hosted. I thought he was fine. He was better than Jimmy Kimmel. I'm just really glad to not see Jimmy Kimmel up there. Way too much Jimmy Kimmel hosting the Oscars. But I don't think he was exemplary. I think that, his brand of humor didn't offend anyone for the most part, which is pretty good. But, there was only a couple jokes that I really was like, oh yeah, that's a good one, Otherwise, I felt like it was kind of just a safe comedic performance from him. I do think the bit where he was he was making a spoof on wasting time, so he ended up making a song that wasted everyone's time, was a misfire. I mean, first of all, we do got to get things moving, okay? We can't make a joke about it. Even if just because we're aware of we're wasting time doesn't mean we should waste time. And some people later on in the program decided they wanted to waste time up on the stage. We'll talk about that. But yeah, so overall, I enjoyed it. The Adam Sandler thing, I'm going to be honest, it's getting really tired. The Adam Sandler shtick, it never really did that much for me. It's, this is a 50-year-old man who's he's playing this character, and it's just getting a little old. Is it getting a little old to anyone else? So that part I was kind of like, okay, here we go again. He's dressed down in the audience. He's going to do some stupid stuff. I don't know. I don't hate it. It's just kind of like, do we really need this? Now, as we go through these categories, they're not entirely going to be in order of the broadcast. I kind of put them in order in my list here as I was remembering them. I know that we start with supporting actor. I remember we usually start with supporting, then do the big ones at the end. Supporting actor went to Kieran Culkin. I was 100% sure about this. This was something that I think everyone who follows these award shows predicted. He was sweeping all the precursors. And I have seen A Real Pain. A Real Pain could have been a Best Picture nominee. I think that A Real Pain and Sing Sing were 11 and 12 if you expanded out the Oscars 10. And it is a shame in many ways that Amelia Perez took one of those spots. I mean, you could also say A Complete Unknown probably didn't deserve to be up there. Like, realistically, we should have probably swapped out A Complete Unknown and Amelia Perez for Sing Sing and A Real Pain. I have not seen Sing Sing, but I have seen A Real Pain. I saw it with my parents. We all really enjoyed it. Kieran, he's basically the lead, but it's a co-lead. It's a co-lead with Jesse Eisenberg's character. And I do like Kieran's performance, although I would argue that Jesse's was, I don't know, maybe I related to Jesse's a little bit more in some instances, even though the subject matter of, mental health that is very much emanating from Kieran's performance very much spoke to me. I mean, I felt it was painful to watch though. And so I think you end up kind of rooting more for Jesse Eisenberg's character and kind of you pity Kieran Culkin's character, but sometimes it's a little too much. And as someone who is not the kind of person who will, not have a mouth filter in a public setting and just say whatever they want, but does have mental health issues that sometimes make me want to say things, I found Kieran Culkin's character very unnerving for that because it was like, oh my God, if I had no mouth filter, maybe I could be like that. But it was kind of like, oh, I would never say those things around strangers. I mean, he was really, he was acting a fool around people that, they had a real right to be mad at him. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. So you pity him, but you're sort of like, you're doing too much. You're doing too much. You can't use mental health as an excuse to be an asshole in front of strangers on this tour that you're ruining for everyone else by your behavior. I really felt for Jesse Eisenberg's character in a lot of scenes, even though I empathized with what Kieran Culkin was struggling with. So a really nuanced performance. And yeah, I would say Kieran's speech was probably one of my favorites. I don't necessarily love seeing men talk about their wives birthing children like it's such a nonchalant thing that they're pushing for, and him doing that on stage. I'm sure she's 100% okay with it, but I saw some people point out it gave them the ick. I feel that. I wasn't 100% on board with that, but whatever. And then we have supporting actress, which was awarded a little bit later in the night, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm doing it up here. Zoe Saldana was a shoo-in as well. The supporting always ends up being a lot more cut and dry in the race, usually, than the main actor and actress categories. I don't know why that is. Because, last year's supporting actress was locked up with Divine Joy Randolph. Zoe Saldana is probably one of the best actors in Amelia Perez, but it's a legacy award. We are giving that to her for Guardians of the Galaxy, for Avatar, for Star Trek. I mean, that's how you have to look at it. I mean, as someone who is not a fan of the film, that's how you have to make yourself look at it. Because, and I saw someone say that all the controversy around Amelia Perez might have actually helped Zoe Saldana lock that in, because the Academy made all of these nominations before the Carla Sofia Gascon tweet debacle became news. And I think that if the tweet debacle had not happened, if Carla had never been exposed for making those tweets, never made them, Amelia Perez would have taken home a lot more awards the other night. I think possibly even Best Picture. It was looking like Amelia Perez was set to win Best Picture after the nominees. I'm just saying, it was not looking great. It was kind of like, yikes, 13 nominations. That's up there with some of the highest tallies of nominations that any film has ever gotten. I think 14 is the record still at this point. I mean, it's just like, yikes. It's sad to say, but thank God for Carla Sofia Gascon's stupidity. Well, and racism, soft bigotry. I mean, I could make a whole separate video dissecting her tweets and Carla as a person and her reaction to those tweets being exposed. This video is going to be too long already. I can't get into that. But all I will say is that, you could find ways to contextualize and maybe defend a few of the things that she said. But at the end of the day, it was a more recent bout of postings. It wasn't like this was years and years ago when we weren't quite as PC about things. This is like 2020, 2021. This is COVID era that she's posting, and she is a full-grown woman, okay? Fully grown person posting these things, not like they were a teenager, like the, Camila Cabello situation. It's just inexcusable, I mean, one tweet here and there, it's like, maybe we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but the sheer volume of them and the angle at which they're kind of getting at is disturbing. And, it's sad, but Caitlyn Jenner has been proof to the LGBTQ community for a long time now that just because you are one of us doesn't mean you support us, and by us, I mean predominantly the trans community, which I'm not a part of, but, as a greater LGBTQ group, it's not a good look. I do wonder what Caitlyn Jenner and Carla, if they're going to link up. Because it seems like they might have similar views on some things. I don't know. Caitlyn Jenner may still be more far right than Carla. I don't get the vibe that Carla is a Trump supporter. But anyway, let's neither here nor there. But I will say that thank goodness in some ways for those tweets, because it really derailed. I mean, obviously it derailed Carla's Best Actress campaign. There was a point where we actually thought it was going to be rescinded. I'm surprised she even showed up. I must mention Conan made a joke that referenced Carla, which did make fun of the tweets. And I was actually my first thought was, ooh, how well is this going to go over on social media? It's like, okay, yes, he's kind of burning Carla and he is kind of like poking fun at her expense, which is like deserved. But at the same time, he is also making light of tweets that are very disturbing in some ways for many people. And so one could wonder, it's like the flippancy of discussing it like that as a joke and turning her tweeting into a joke when the tweets in question are not really anything to laugh about is, I could see some people, but to be honest, I haven't seen anyone come for Conan for it. Maybe, I don't know. It's not something I would cancel Conan over. I just was, as someone who knows how the internet thinks. I used to be on leftist Twitter. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I'm on Threads. God, get me off Threads. Threads is, it's just as bad. But, everyone come to Blue Sky, please. So yeah, it's a shame for Ariana. I will say that I am a little worried about Ariana and Cynthia's prospects going into Wicked for good. With the Oscars, having movies come out back to back that are genre fantasy films that don't technically usually get those kind of Oscar noms anyway, that's a risk. People are saying that Cynthia and Ariana are shoo-ins for supporting actress and actor next year. I wouldn't say that for sure. I would not say that at all, that they are shoo-ins. I mean, next year is going to be a completely different animal. We don't know what the competition is really going to look like. We don't know what films might completely drown Wicked for Good out of the water, especially in terms of critical acclaim. So I hope Wicked for Good is a good movie and that it's even better than the first Wicked. But based on what I know about the musical and the second half and how people feel about it, I'm a little concerned. So I'm sorry, there's a very good chance that this was Ari and Cynthia's shot for Wicked. Now, of course, they're still young. There's plenty of time for them to be nominated and win for other movies. But for Wicked, I don't see both of them getting carried through the second time. Am I the only one who's crazy in saying that? I feel like, the stands are just like kind of delusional in thinking that. They don't know how the Oscars work. One of my favorite franchises of all time, The Lord of the Rings, they did not nominate those actors every time. I mean, it's just not how it works. And perhaps dividing Wicked into two parts might have not been beneficial for that reason. Usually movies, when they're divided into two like that, like a big franchise movie like Deathly Hallows or The Hunger Games, there's no prospect of any big above the line nominations. So they're not worried about jeopardizing that by doing that. But I don't think people predicted Wicked to be as big of an awards contender. I know at this time last year, most of us weren't. So it's going to be interesting to see how it fares. I think next year Wicked's best chances is going to be an original song, because that's a category they weren't competitive in this year. And maybe John Chu for directing, because he wasn't nominated this year. It's the categories that they don't get nominated in this year that I think are better shots for next year. And then maybe costumes again. But even costumes, they might want to give it to something else if they feel like we just did this. So it's going to be tough for Wicked next year, and that's not good news for people who think that Wicked was cruelly treated this year. I think 2 Oscar wins and 10 nominations is pretty good for a IP musical fantasy live action kind of movie like Wicked, blockbuster movie like Wicked. Let's talk about animated film. This was one of the ones I got wrong. I was shook. So in preparation for this video, I have seen 4 out of the 5 animated film nominees. The only one I have not seen as a filming is Memoir of a Snail, and I would like to see it. It looks very interesting. I watched Flow the night before the Oscars because it was on Max, and I was like, I need to see this. I need to see as many movies as I can with the streaming services that I have before the ceremony. And I'm really glad I did. Flow beat The Wild Robot. I cannot believe it. Last year, Spider-Verse lost to The Boy and the Heron, which I was jumping for joy with, if you remember my reaction. And this year, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm happy that Flow won, but I was kind of rooting for The Wild Robot. I saw The Wild Robot in theaters, and I've now seen it twice, and that movie is really special. And I also do think that The Wild Robot is special in that it comes from a major studio, and it's that good. One thing that a little bit concerns me is that, DreamWorks is going to put up their hands and say, well, we tried, we're going to keep making shit. It's like, no, DreamWorks, this is just a push to do better so that you can get that Best Animated Feature win. Because I don't believe DreamWorks has won Best Animated Feature since Rango in 2011. Is that a DreamWorks movie? I can't exactly recall. But if I'm not mistaken, I don't think DreamWorks has won Best Animated Feature in at least a decade. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going through my, the box here, and I'm like, that doesn't seem like that's been the case. So this would have been a big win for DreamWorks. And, The Wild Robot is potentially going to have a sequel, so maybe there's hope there. In a couple years, we could see The Wild Robot maybe get another shot. Inside Out, we've seen sequels get nominated for, they might not win. Like Inside Out 2 didn't win when Inside Out won. That makes sense. But, Toy Story 3 won. It can happen. But what I will say is that Flow is a very low budget, no dialogue kind of, I don't want to say it feels like a tech demo, but there are moments where it does feel like a tech demo. There's definitely a DIY feel to the movie, and I do love that about it. But I do feel like Flow, I don't know. It's just hard. I think both of them are such deserving winners, and it was such a close race. I think that Flow winning just points to how the Oscars have really gone into a more international direction. And I also think, perhaps Guillermo del Toro a few years ago, winning and calling out the Academy about animation has made them kind of reevaluate what they're awarding. Although Flow is not like The Boy and the Heron, and that Flow is a much more child-centric movie. It's a movie for kids, but I think adults can enjoy. I think Flow, yeah, there were parts of it I was a little, I don't want to say bored by. But there were parts of it where it felt like it was just going through the motions of a dragged out story that, is very bare bones because there's no dialogue. And there were a lot of parts of it I kind of wish were better fleshed out. Like, where did this flood come from? Where is this world? It at first feels like it's just planet Earth in the year 2024. And then you're like, wait a minute, no, are we on a different planet? Are we in a different futuristic timeline on this planet? Are we in an ancient civilization? Are we even in the northern or southern hemisphere? Like, I can't tell where this takes place because we're in like different types of forests and environments, and we've got monkeys and other kinds of animals that don't always seem like they seem to live in the same biomes inhabiting together. So I haven't done the deep dive research into that. I'd be curious to look into that if anyone in the comments has some thoughts on that. I kept having questions. The movie felt a little surrealist and a little bit like one giant metaphor rather than something you take that literally. The cat is so darn cute, though, as a lover of cats. I mean, and it did bring tears to my eyes. There's a few moments that I was like almost fully on bawling, and for a movie to do that, only an animated movie can do that for me. Something about the animation of animals. Oh, it can just really tug at me. So yeah, Flow is a deserving win, but I would have given it to The Wild Robot. I would have said this is one year where the major studio deserved it. But I guess, the Oscars are not going to touch them for a little while. They're saying no. No to Disney, no to DreamWorks. Speaking of Disney, I feel like, we gotta talk about the fact that Disney has now gone 3 years without having, I'm talking about Walt Disney Animation Studios, by the way, I'm not talking about Pixar. Pixar's always been doing good with noms. They almost always get nominated. But Walt Disney Animation has not been nominated for an Academy Award, or 3 years ago. So, I mean, the last 3 years, the Walt Disney Animation hasn't even been nominated. I think that just goes to show what a rut Disney Animation is in right now. And I know that they're restructuring and they're going to have a new creative head, executive. Jennifer Lee is stepping down. I really hope that Disney Animation can get back on its feet. It's sad. As a lover of the Disney Animation branch, I'm just like, come on, you can't let Pixar be carrying you. Like, you need to step it up. But can we also point out that it is so messed up that Ralph Breaks the Internet got an Oscar nomination? Like, why did that get nominated? Makes no sense. Frozen 2 did not get nominated. Ralph Breaks the Internet did the year prior. That makes no sense. Frozen 2 deserves it more than Ralph Breaks the Internet. Makes no sense. But anyway, all right, let's talk about some of these categories. I'm going to go a lot quicker through. Costumes. There were a lot of deserving noms. Nosferatu would have been my second choice. I thought the costuming, I actually recently watched the behind the scenes costuming was highlighted in that of Nosferatu, and it was just so exquisite to see the attention to detail there. But this was always Wicked's award, and I loved seeing Bowen Yang show up, and be Bowen Yang. And then production design was also Wicked's other win. How could it not be? They built as much practical as they could. Although shout out to Nosferatu, which also built a ton of practical, and watching the special features of that, I was like, oh, this is so amazing. They built that village. I mean, they had to expend it out with CGI, but they built those streets of Visburg in Prague. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And, outside, it wasn't in a studio. The amount of work that goes into some of these productions is just mind-blowing. Makeup and hairstyling, the one award for the substance. And I think most Substance fans were like, at the very least, give it to us. We all know the makeup and hairstyling award is really the prosthetics award. It almost has nothing to do with hairstyling. Because otherwise Barbie should have been nominated last year. But anyway, so it makes no sense that Barbie didn't get that nom last year. That just still doesn't make sense. But anyway, makeup and hairstyling definitely deserves to go to the Substance. I have seen the Substance. I was very afraid to watch that movie. But I think going in, just like being prepared for the worst helped make the movie not quite as bad as I feared it would be in terms of the gore. Because, I'm not into intense body horror stuff. The end of the movie is very absurd, and I could understand why some people might feel like it ruins it for them. But, overall, I was very entranced by the film. There's something so hypnotic about it, and it is a very like peppy film. Like it's just so exuberant and flashy, and yes, gross, but I was able to kind of get into it. I was worried I wasn't, and I do think Demi Moore gives a wonderful performance that would have been deserving of the award. We'll talk about that. Editing. This was one of the more up in the air categories. I saw a lot of people thought Conclave would take this. I believe Conclave might have won this at the BAFTAs. I can't remember. But it ended up going to Anora. As someone who has seen Conclave but who has not seen Anora, I can understand why Conclave would be an editing movie. I mean, editing, I think, is a strong point of Conclave. From scene to scene, juggling all of these different characters, all of these popes and their different angles and agendas, and having these montages and sequences of voting. It was very well, I think, rhythmically handled. I actually don't love Conclave. It wasn't my favorite of the Best Picture nominees I've seen so far. It was okay. I didn't feel like as blown away by it as I maybe was hoping to be. But, it winning only one award, we'll get to that, I'm actually kind of okay with. I know some people would have loved to have seen it take Best Picture. I'm not 100% sure it would have been my Best Picture. But, yeah, I felt like the movie was a little... I think what bothered me the most was the movie was so hard to believe. Because it was trying so hard to like reenact a realistic conclave as if this could really happen today. But then there were certain aspects of the politics that didn't feel real to what was going on or could be possible, especially that bomb going off. And then, the hole coming through. I was just like, this is like it's taking me out of it. It's just too preposterous. I get it's fiction, but I wanted it to feel as real as possible. And there were moments and choices that were made that took me out of it. I do think it is funny how many people pointed out that the actual Oscar nomination season ended up going a lot like the Conclave, in that, Amelia Perez was taken out by shady tweets being exposed, and then The Brutalist had controversy exposed, and Anora had controversy, and it's just like Conclave's like, I'll win. Yeah. So Anora takes editing. I think this is the point that we all thought, oh, Anora's winning Best Picture. This is, it already, if it's getting editing, it's probably getting screenplay and director. And yeah, then you've got that locked package. Sound went to Dune 2. A very deserved win. I do think, unfortunately, Dune Part 2 shouldn't have come out when it came out. It's a shame that it got pushed. It was originally supposed to come out in November of 2023, but then it would have been competing against Oppenheimer. And I'm not 100% sure if Dune 2 would have beat Oppenheimer for Best Picture. It would have been going up against Barbie and Oppenheimer. That would have been a stacked year. That would have been crazy if that had happened. In some ways, Dune 2 getting pushed spread out the competition a little bit. I still think Dune 2 is the best movie of 2024 that I have yet seen. For me, the most impressive film. But, I still have a lot of movies that I need to see. Like, The Brutalist, for example, is one that I'm really hoping is just as good. But it's a shame it came out as early. It actually came out before the 2024 Oscars. That's how early it came out in the year. And, Everything Everywhere All at Once, it did come out earlier in the year, but I think it was May that it came out in theaters, which is still better than March. It was just so early. With Dune Messiah, they better make sure, and if they have to push to 2027, that's okay. The movie has to come out at least in July, if not closer to, the holidays, because I'm hoping Dune Messiah is sort of like a Return of the King situation where it starts to get a lot of noms and a lot of wins. But we'll see. Anywho, so sound went to Dune. Score went to The Brutalist. I have listened to the score, or at least snippets of it, on Apple Music. Some of it's a little, repetitive and slow. It's a very minimalist score. I will say I'd be interested to see the movie and see how much more the score jumps out to me. But already there were some piano moments that I thought were the most stirring. And of course, the horn section at the beginning is already so iconic. Without even seeing the film, I just can already see it. So I think Daniel Blumberg definitely deserved it as a score. You know, I'm so glad it didn't go to Conclave. The score in Conclave was so staccato and abrupt and jarring and tense. I just didn't vibe with it. I mean, I guess it fit for the kind of movie that it was, but it's not the kind of movie I would give a score win to by any means. It is just such a travesty that Dune Part 2 was not allowed to compete in this category. I mean, in years past it would have, but they made this new rule about, you know, a certain percentage being original, which I don't even think that the Dune Part 2 score is that unoriginal. I think it's very different in many ways from the Part 1 score. But, you know, the Part 1 score did win. So I have to give it that. You know, the first score was really good. So, song goes to El Mal. I think we all saw this as the only option that we were going to see happen. It is certainly probably the worst song out of the 5 that were nominated. But hey, this year we didn't actually have any songs performed on stage. And that's largely because I think everyone realized that these songs are not good enough to be. I actually prefer Mi Camino. If I had to give a song to Emilia Perez, it would have been that one. El Mal, one of the worst songs. Not the worst song in the movie by any means. There's a lot of bad songs though. Mi Camino is the only one that's remotely listenable in my opinion. But boy, those songwriters on stage were they cringe. Everyone was talking about how they seemed like, you know, they were drunk French people. And, you know, the way they were talking about the Spanish language is so good for pop. You could just see how this movie was made, their thought process, and how little they actually cared about authenticity by just the way they were talking about the making of the music. It was very like, oh my God, the emperor has no clothes. Like, this is so clear now where this is going. And the way she started singing, and we were all just like, good God, like, get her off the stage. Like, it was kind of funny, but at the same time, for Emilia Perez, it was like, we don't want to give this film any recognition. Like, and also, can we just talk about the fact that I know there's only 2 awards that it got. No mention of the trans community by Zoe Saldana or the songwriters. I mean, in this climate we're living in, when this whole movie was kind of made to push trans representation, you're not even going to mention it. When I get to the end, I'll kind of go over a few things about that. All right. Documentary. Speaking of politics, I was holding my breath. I have not seen any of the documentaries, and to be honest, the only one I'm probably going to see is the one that did win, which is No Other Land. This is a Palestinian-Israeli co-production that is about the West Bank and the settlements and the displacement of Palestinian people there and their treatment in Israel over many decades. And it is so important to be spotlighted in a method like this. This film still does not have distribution in the United States, which is not surprising, sadly, but very sad, because the narrative is just not still in a very good place. And criticism of Israel is still something that Hollywood is afraid of. And it's why I was very concerned that this movie would potentially got the nomination, but that it wouldn't win. It didn't win at BAFTA. So when it did win, I was just like, thank goodness. And then on top of that, the creators gave a phenomenal speech that was the most topical and the most political of the night, which I was sitting next to my mom watching the Oscars, and she kept commenting as the night wore on, where is the topical commentary on what's going on? Where is the Jane Fonda SAG Award speech that we got last weekend from Jane Fonda? That was an amazing speech that she gave for her Lifetime Achievement Award. Why is everyone just completely ignoring the elephant in the room? And outside of the No Other Land win, you know, Daryl Hannah did give a shout out to Ukraine, and there were a couple other moments where, there were allusions to what's going on, some platitudes that we hear often. We'll talk about Adrian Brody. But overall, the only thing that was topical was this Palestinian dog, which, is very important. I'm so glad that happened, because otherwise I'd be looking at this ceremony like, oh my God, this is so sad. People are saying that, maybe they were pressured to not talk about Trump, to not talk about Ukraine, to not talk about politics, obviously outside of the Palestinian documentary, to talk about Israel. I don't know. I kind of am more inclined to believe that maybe a few of them were, but most, I don't know. Some people are like, we wanted to escape and not think about it and pretend for one night that the world is normal. I don't know. It's really sad. I think the Oscars this year, more than ever, was an Oscars that needed to be political. I think that Conan O'Brien is not a good host for that. And to be fair, Jimmy Kimmel, he does often put politics in his comedy. Now, I'm not saying I would want Jimmy Kimmel to do it, but that is one thing he would probably bring more to the table. Conan only made one joke about Russians. I'm talking about Anora. That was topical. But, it was a very largely apolitical ceremony. And I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. We are not living in normal times. It feels like we have lost our country. Like, it feels like the United States is literally crumbling before our eyes under authoritarianism. And the world is itself starting to fall apart. But anyway, let's talk more about the next category. Just shout out to those documentary filmmakers. Let me also just point out that it was an Israeli-Palestinian collaboration. There is an Israeli, journalist who is interviewed and part of making this film. It is a Palestinian who spearheads this documentary, but it's about an Israeli coming to this West Bank neighborhood. Forgive me, I don't know all the details. I haven't watched it yet, but learning about what's been going on and sort of seeing through the propaganda of what the Israeli side has been saying about this and sort of being like, oh my gosh, this is about unity. This is about peace. And the United States foreign, affairs, diplomacy in this area is inhibiting that. And that was a really important direct call out. I mean, obviously we need to call out Netanyahu. He is the actual real problem in this conflict, but we need to call out the US government too for being, right behind him in a lot of this. So that was an extremely, just, yes, like get out of your seat and just like say, thank you for saying this. And they didn't play him off. They did not play him off. I was so worried they would. Thank goodness the Oscars got the memo. This was one speech that you needed to give at least like 4 minutes to, if not longer. And he was very succinct, so he was good at getting it out. But like, oh my gosh, so important. I'm so glad they didn't rush him off the stage. All right. I'm not going to talk about the shorts because, I haven't seen any of those films. Congrats to all the winners. Unfortunately, those categories, they just don't. Documentary short, live action short, animated short, they just don't generate the kind of interest that most people have, or I do. All right, let's talk about the screenplay win. So original screenplay went to Anora. This was actually before editing, I believe we got this award. And this was the only time that Anora could have possibly lost to A Real Pain. And to be completely honest with you, I would have probably given it to A Real Pain, only though I haven't seen Anora. So it's kind of like, it's kind of tough. Once I see it, I might feel a little more like that was justified. I mean, some people have said that like Anora, I don't know. I've heard a lot of different things about the movie. I've heard some people say it is a screenplay movie through and through. It deserves to win nothing else. It's screenplay. And I've heard other people say that, it's a poorly written look at sex work. And Mikey's character is underdeveloped. And so there's lots of different, I'd be curious to see it myself. It probably is a very deserving win though. And then adapted screenplay was Conclaves. So I think this was a lot more of a shoo-in. It's, based on a book that it seemed like a very well-written, screen-written kind of movie. And, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of it, I can acknowledge it was a pretty well-written movie. Cinematography went to The Brutalist, and now as someone who loved Nosferatu, I would have loved to have seen Nosferatu take this. I think the cinematography in that is incredible. the best I've seen so far, but I have not seen The Brutalist. And all of the trailers and all the clips make me think, oh my God, if nothing else, this movie is for cinematographers. So The Brutalist is going to be a visual treat. I am very excited for it in that regard alone. The music and the visuals. I hope that the actual dialogue and the pacing of it is enough to keep me interested for 3.5 hours. We're probably going to split the movie in half with the intermission because I know my parents aren't going to sit through. We split Killers of the Flower Moon into 2 nights. I mean, we're not going to, we had to create our own intermission. We're going to do the same thing with The Brutalist, but thankfully, Brady Corbet gave us a built-in intermission to do so. All right, and then we have director. This was Sean Baker. Sean Baker got up a lot, won a lot of awards. Yeah, Brady Corbet had a shot, but he lost the DGA award, which is apparently the most important when it comes to director, as a precursor to the Oscars. And this is Sean Baker's 4th movie, I can't recall, but he's been around. Brady Corbet just started out. This was like his first somewhat big movie, even though it's important to point out that both of these movies, The Brutalist and Anora, are low budget movies, like 10 million or less. That's very low budget. I think Anora has only a $6 million dollar budget. That's incredible. In fact, I think Anora might be one of the lowest budgeted movies to ever win Best Picture, at least in the 21st century. Be interested to see what Coda's budget was, because Coda might be the only one that it might be close with in that regard, because Coda was a very small film too. All right, so then, and also this is when Sean Baker, I think we were all kind of like, at least there was like enough of the thank you over and over again. He got out his paper and he was like, I gotta say something. And it was topical. It was about the decline of the movie theater. And I do think that, it was important for him to spotlight. I do think, though, that in the current economic climate that we find ourselves in, and especially with the threat of possible worsening of said economy based on tariffs, based on cutting of social services like Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, the cost increases at the grocery store, that we're still dealing with. Trump hasn't fixed that yet. Going to the theater is kind of a bit of a privilege, and it's expensive. It's not like it used to be. I went to see one of them days with my friend at Regal, and it was a matinee, and I was just shocked that each ticket was $15. I was just like, this is insane. Not including the popcorn, and and it's tough. It's expensive to go to the theater, and so I try and go for movies I really, really want to see. But otherwise, it's tempting to wait for streaming, and that's what you have to do. So it's tough. I feel for Sean. I feel for the sentiment, but I also feel like a lot needs to be done. I feel like a lot needs to be done to improve the theatrical experience. There needs to be more premium screens. There needs to be better policies around cell phone use. They need to be cleaner. And yeah, they probably could be a little cheaper. I know theaters are struggling and inflation is real, but, I know that, there are cheaper times to go. And so it's tough. It's just a shame that now going to the movies, you have to go on a certain day because it's the only day it's affordable. It's like, it used to be affordable almost every day, but now it's just Tuesdays at Regal. That's like cheap. It's like, come on. So it's rough out there. Anora personally does not scream the kind of movie that I would see in a theater. It looks like a streaming movie to me. It looks like the kind of movie I would watch on Hulu. And that's where I'm going to watch it. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to go to the theater to see Wicked or Dune 2 or Inside Out 2, like movies or Nosferatu. They all end in a ooh sound. But, it's tough. War of the Rohirrim, I would see those in theaters. But, you'll see what you're interested in, but you're not going to see movies every week. It's just gone are the days of people doing that. Unless you have AMC A-List or Regal Unlimited, which, again, I'm looking into. I don't know how the theaters make any money off those, though. I don't know how the theaters are actually making money off of those subscription services. Okay. Actor and actress. So actor was the one that was pretty much locked. Timothée Chalamet had a chance to upset because of the SAG win, but it ended up going to Adrien Brody. And based on what I've heard, I do think Adrien Brody is probably the best choice to win. in that he is probably one of the best actor winners we've had in a long time. Like, best performance, out of the park, no question. Again, I'll judge that for sure when I see it, but based on what I've seen, it looks like that's a very accurate statement. He was very good in The Pianist, which I still have not seen. He won in 2003 for that, 22 years ago. And full circle, his second nomination, he wins again. That's crazy. He's one of the few, I think, actors to have that stat. Maybe the only one. So that's a pretty big stat for him. However, his speech, we all got some thoughts. He went on for 5 minutes and 30 some seconds, longest Oscar speech in history. But it wasn't like he was speaking for all that time. There was a lot of thinking about what he was going to say. And look, I get it. Like, sometimes you're going to take a moment to collect your thoughts, because Lord knows I'm not a public speaker. When I get up there, I don't blame anyone for just reading from a page, because it is just like to keep your brain moving in that way, and the nerves and the adrenaline, knowing you're on a time clock. It must be so stressful. But I just felt like Adrien Brody did not use up that 5 minutes and 30 seconds effectively. I feel like what he said could have been an email. And most importantly, most jarringly, when he said, "You're not going to play me off." Can you imagine if, I don't know, is that an argument that can be played? Like, if someone who wasn't a somewhat attractive white male pulled that stunt, and a younger one, do you think it would have gone over as well? I mean, it's probably not going to go over well for Adrien either, because I don't think a lot of people liked the way he did that. Apparently, he also threw his gum to his wife when he was on stage. Did he hand it to her or throw it to her? I can't remember. Someone was saying something about that. I missed that. But someone was, saying he did something with gum that was very unprofessional. But yeah, I did not like that, he was like, "Stop. You're not going to, this is my second time. You're not going to get me off this stage." It's like, who are you? Like, you're not any better than any of the other nominees. And all, we've given you plenty of time. You're clearly stumbling through your general thank yous, which, to be honest with you, I do often feel like if I won an Oscar, I would be like, okay, so all of y'all, you know who you are. I thank you all. I'm going to say what I need to say. And I wouldn't spend all this time just thanking all these people. But I can understand why they do it. He then starts to talk about, his movie and the Holocaust and discrimination. He mentions anti-Semitism. He also talks about how you never know if your career is going to, nosedive. He won for the Oscar 22 years ago, and then he's mostly been, but to be honest, people are saying that he's been struggling. I think it's more been his choice. He's kind of mostly just done Wes Anderson movies since then and been in some clunkers outside of that. But is Adrien Brody really, like, I feel like he's pretending that he had a rough career, but in reality, he just was being picky. Like, he was like, well, I just want to work with certain hipster people, not like be in like big blockbusters. I don't know, Adrien. Like, I don't buy that. Like, you had like a blacklisted moment after your Pianist win. Like, I don't buy that. But anyway, he was in The Village, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And he's very good in that role. But, yeah, Adrien Brody, I don't know. If I wanted to nitpick, I could say that the anti-Semitism thing, unfortunately, that term, that word, has been started to be used, or I would say abused, by the Israeli government in particular, to use as a shield against, any sort of criticism of their actions in Palestine and Gaza. And, sometimes you can't help but like wonder, like, where does he mean by anti-Semitism? But it's, it's a tough one. I mean, he is Jewish. I mean, he's not a practicing Jew, but he is Jewish descent, Jewish parents. And so, his movie is about a Jewish architect, coming from the Holocaust, just like his first Oscar win. And, I can understand him mentioning that. But I hate to say it, I do feel like what is more topical to speak about right now is what's going on to Palestinian people. And also, more just broadly what's going on to anti-Semitism is tough because I do believe it still exists and it needs to be called out. And it's a horrible form of racism that still exists. But I just don't know if it exists quite as much as these other forms of racism. Not to play Oppression Olympics, but it's like, read the room, you know. It's not things have changed a little bit. I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm not Jewish, so I feel like I shouldn't comment on this, but it's something that I've seen a lot of Jewish people mention and talk about. They're frustrated with how the term anti-Semitism has started to be kind of come coded in a way to be used to deflect. And that's, calling someone who is critical of the Israeli government an anti-Semite is so disingenuous, and I believe is actually anti-Semitic because it's harming the Gentile view of Jewish people by making us more and more like, what the fuck? That's right out of the Nazi playbook. You should know better than anyone else not to do that. But anyway, so I'm just going to leave that there. I don't believe that Adrian Brody, I think, you know what, he's just an actor who, he's not going to be the one starting the revolution, okay? He's going to say some platitude on stage about ending racism and anti-Semitism, and it's the best we're going to get out of him, okay? We can't ask more from these people. So not everyone is Meryl Streep, not everyone is Jane Fonda, and I wish we had more of them, activist actors, speaking out, and it does tend to be more women than men. We do got some. Guillermo del Toro as a director, very vocal online. Mark Hamill, very vocal. They're out there, but a bunch of them just they're there to be in a movie, and we can't expect much more from them. But it is a shame. I just feel like the moment demanded a better speech from him, especially considering he made it so that he was up there for so long. And I just feel like his speech was a whole lot of nothing. And I'm not going to lie, it kind of gave inflated ego, narcissist, didn't rub me the right way. On top of that, his current wife is Harvey Weinstein's ex-wife. That's crazy. That's crazy. But, she was a victim probably too. So, All right, let's move on to actress. This was the most up in the air acting category. Look, I would have loved to have seen it go to Demi Moore. I'm not really confident that she is ever going to have another chance. People are so certain that she won't. I don't know. You never know. Frances McDormand, keeps getting nominated. I mean, and she's very up there. It could happen. This could be a resurgence for Demi, but, this was kind of her moment. But just like how it was kind of Ray Fiennes' moment, too. Like, is Ray Fiennes going to get another shot? Maybe not. Although I don't think Ray Fiennes deserved it. I'm going to be honest. I'm one of the few people who probably thinks that. I didn't feel like Ray Fiennes' performance was that, I don't know. It just wasn't that showy to me. But I don't know. Conclave just didn't impress me that much. I hate saying that. There was some gorgeous cinematic shots, but and some interesting intrigue. Some Gossip Girl in the Vatican kind of whispers in the corridor moments. But overall, it was just kind of like, okay, I can see why this is Oscar bait. I can see why this is nominated. But with all that being said, Demi Moore, yeah, justice for her. It's tough. I see a lot of people say that Mikey Madison, is a 25-year-old. She's brunette, just like Demi. She kind of looks like her. She's winning the award over her at the 11th hour when Demi was winning all these precursors, but not BAFTA. And BAFTA's the most important with the acting. It's unfortunate. SAG goes for narrative, and the Oscars sometimes go for narrative, but more often than not these days they are not. And so, I don't know what to tell you. It's kind of a shame, but I haven't seen Anora, so when I see it, I'll hopefully feel better about Mikey winning. This is why I was really glad I saw Poor Things when Emma Stone beat Lily Gladstone, because if I hadn't seen Poor Things, I probably would have been more mad about it. But having seen Poor Things, I was like, no, I'm okay with this. I need to see Anora to fully feel okay with it. But yeah, I wasn't expecting Mikey to give a transcendent speech either. I mean, she was a lot tighter, it was much more, just a nervous girl on stage. who maybe feels like she has a little bit of imposter syndrome. Wouldn't blame her. I'd feel that way. She's pretty young. The Academy tends to actually historically, the Academy has given older actresses the award, but recently it seems to have shifted, but only somewhat recently. It's still not that long ago that it was the Frances McDormand and Meryl Streep award. So at this point, we knew it was obvious. Anora is winning Best Picture, and it's winning with 5 wins. A lot of people thought it might get 4. I predicted that it would lose actress, but it would get everything else. But at the end of the day, Anora is the Best Picture winning film. The substance isn't. There is a horror bias. It still is amazing that Demi was second. And, that goes a long way. And shout out to Fernanda Torres, because she was third, and it's incredible that she was nominated as well. But let's talk about the one last thing I completely forgot to mention. International feature went to I'm Still Here, which was the other moment where I was probably the most on the edge of my seat. Amelia Perez losing this was the biggest sign that the Academy voters regretted giving Amelia Perez all those nominations. And that was kind of it was kind of like, okay, there's some sanity in this world. They regret going so hard for it. They see how things are. I'm Still Here surged at the right moment. It didn't release in theaters in the United States until Oscar voting started for the actual, not the nominees, but the actual voting. And it got such a surge at the right moment, just as Amelia Perez was tanking. And so it so deserved. I very much look forward to seeing I'm Still Here. I think a lot of people have not seen that film, though. It's one of the ones I think everyone can forgive you for not seeing, because it's still in kind of limited release. But one day I will see it, and it's about a very important talk about a topical situation. And they alluded to it with their win. They could have gone a little harder in connecting the dots to what's going on right now and what was going on in Latin America at that time. So very happy. Amelia Perez, no one mourns the wicked. No, that's mean to Elphaba. We don't want to associate Elphaba with Amelia, but it fits. It still took home 2 awards, but like 2 out of 13 is actually kind of bad. I mean, that's pretty embarrassing for the film. All right, let's talk a little bit about the rest of the ceremony. So there was a James Bond treatment. I think a lot of people felt like it was a little out of place, especially since there isn't a big James Bond anniversary at the moment. And also, the franchise isn't dead, but, a lot of people felt like it was kind of a eulogy to it. And judging by the sale to Amazon, I think one could easily view it that way. Amazon now owns the IP of James Bond. They finally wrestled it from the original creators and producers, and for a pretty penny. And we'll see how that franchise continues. But I will say the musicians they picked were very random. Lisa from Blackpink, who's now on White Lotus. Shout out to White Lotus. I've been watching that new season. Ray, who's a very talented singer from the UK, and Doja Cat, who is probably the most out of place. Well, Lisa kind of, but you know what? Doja Cat looked good in that diamond dress. And actually, she did not a bad rendition. It was not the best. Vocals were still not to the level of the original singers of those iconic Bond songs. They couldn't get Adele. I mean, Adele already did an amazing performance. So she wasn't going to come back and do it. So I thought Ray was a perfect choice. I think very few British singers could be to Adele's level, and I think Ray was a good choice for it. I think she was one of the strongest vocalists out of the group. And of course, Margaret Qualley did some dancing. The In Memoriam, at first I thought the Lacrimosa Requiem from Mozart was a little odd as a choice because it is so lacrimose, so to speak, and morbid that it makes it kind of feel a little bit like a death march kind of song. I always associate it with that. But, some people were critiquing the musical choice. It's a very, traditional funeral song. For, hundreds of years it's been that. So I can understand. When I saw Maggie Smith up there, I knew it was going to be hard, but it just kind of broke me a little bit. I was like, I cannot believe that I've seen Maggie Smith in an Oscars memoriam. Of course, they went hard for Gene Hackman. Really tragic, although he was older. He was 96. he had a good run. It's what more sad is what happened to his wife and dog. But anyway, uh, people were mentioning how Michelle Trachtenberg was not included. I think that's because she wasn't an Academy member. And also, she kind of was mostly just a TV actress, and they can only include so many. So she'll probably be remembered at the Emmys. Um, but someone I did realize after the fact that was glaringly omitted was Bernard Hill, who famously played King Theoden in the Lord of the Rings movies and also played the captain of the Titanic in James Cameron's Titanic. He passed away this year, and yet he was not in the Oscars memoriam. People are saying it's because he was not an Academy member. I have two questions to that. First of all, why was he not an Academy member? And second of all, even if he wasn't an Academy member, don't you think being a pretty big role in two of the biggest Oscar wins in Oscar history, like sweeps for Titanic and Lord of the Rings, don't you think that supersedes that? I'm like, whoa, why are we not including him? But also, why is he not a member of the Academy? That's very strange to me. Or why wasn't he? He's was in the past tense. So that was a little strange. There then was a tribute to Quincy Jones, who was, a producer of a lot of music in film. So that was a fitting tribute from Queen Latifah. Yeah, as far as the presenters, my favorites were probably, obviously, I love Amy Poehler. So I'm going to love everything she does. But the Ben Stiller bit for the production design, the stage way, but that was a clever way to, make the presentation be about the actual category of the award, but still be something we haven't seen before. I thought that was an entertaining bit. And it was neat to see Goldie Hawn out there. Overall, yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a disjointed ceremony. Again, I don't know if Conan did the best with moving things along. He always felt like he was just kind of awkwardly there. But then again, it's always hard to be the host. I feel like the Oscars would work so much better if, there were multiple hosts like they've done in previous years. They just have multiple people come up at different times and talk. Does the Oscars really need to have a consistent host through and through? I don't think so. But anyway, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the wins. We're all happy Amelia Perez was defeated. I'm very excited to see the remaining films. A Complete Unknown and Nickel Boys both did not get anything. I feel really bad for Nickel Boys, but I think Nickel Boys is just happy to be there. I'll be very interested to see that movie. It's a very unique film in that it is filmed from first-person POV. So it'll be very interesting to see a film like that. And of course, I am interested in seeing A Complete Unknown, but, Bob Dylan's not really my thing. So I'm sure it'll be that kind of biopic, musician biopic, where I'm just like, it's nice. It didn't do that much for me. So yeah, I mean, what an interesting year. And the nominees were very diverse. I think there are some great ones in there. It's just a shame. Amelia Perez had to really ruin the mood. And then I also kind of unfortunately have to end on this, which is also like a really sobering but sad reality, which is the fact that the whole situation with Carla Sofia Gascon is so tragic because it is the first, for better or worse, trans actor to be out at the time of nomination, to be nominated. And this is that legacy right now. It'd be one thing if it was attached to a movie that is problematic based on how poorly made it is in terms of representing these marginalized groups from a French cis man, white man, who has no connection to Mexico or the trans community. But on top of that, Carla had to have those tweets. It's just like the perfect storm of, oh God, I've seen some people argue that the tweets actually are probably right-wingers are going to like Carla. They're not going to cancel Carla as like, they're going to be like, that's one of the good trans people. It's like, oh no. But still, it's just like, Carla really dropped the ball. We needed, and it's such a shame because people are not a monolith. Groups are not a monolith. Trans people are not all good people. There are a lot of trans bigots out there, apparently. Caitlyn Jenner And now Carla apparently has soft bigotry, I would say, is more fitting. I wouldn't call her a capital B bigot. Um, but it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting that this all happened like this, and especially at this time when nothing could be more on the line for trans people in particular, queer people in general, but especially trans people. Trans people have just lost rights in the last month. I mean, they just lost the right to be in the military in this country. I mean, it's going in a dark direction, and then we have this mess on top of it. It is very sad. It makes me kind of like, I don't know. It's so sad too, because people are saying maybe the reason no one mentioned being, the trans community is because of Carla. And I'm like, that is so sad. Just because of Carla and you don't want to mention her. And she did get mentioned. Conan mentioned her. I didn't think Carla was getting mentioned at all. Did you notice they did not do the talk about each nominee, like colloquially, for Best Actor and Actress? And at first I was like, why did they do it for supporting, but not for the lead character? And they're showing clips. And then it dawned on me. It's because they don't want to have poor Emma Stone have to say, Carla, my girl, love what you've been saying on social media. Like, they were protecting, and they decided to make it look less obvious. They did it for the actors as well. I mean, they should have just done it for the support. I mean, then we wouldn't have clocked it at all. But it's like, I see what you're doing there, producers. And you know what? It was a good move. Can I just say, I vastly prefer letting the clips speak for themselves. This whole turn to the nominee and give an anecdote about them thing, I'm not a big fan of. It's not as interesting. I want to see clips of them in their roles. Helps me feel like I get a little bit more of a taste of the movie, especially if I haven't seen it. So I really hope that last year they did that for all the categories, and I didn't like it. But that's why they did it that time, to spare poor Emma Stone having to deal with that. But I really do feel like you can't use Carla as an excuse to not mention the trans community, especially since your movie was made to be representation for that community. Like, front and center. That's upsetting. I mean, granted, they weren't on stage very much, but they could have said something when they were on stage. And I'm looking at you, Zoe. It's Zoe was put in a hard spot, and I do feel for her. I think Selena Gomez was really glad she was not nominated. She was like the only thing that didn't come along with that film. She was like, thank God I'm not nominated. It would just not go well for me. So Selena kind of comes out unscathed. It's tough. It's just so sad. Let's all pretend that Elliot Page was the actual first trans actor. Because of course, back for Juno, Elliot was nominated back when, we'll pretend that Elliot Page just wasn't out at the time, the real first trans actor. And then hopefully, not too distant future from now, we will have better representatives of that community be nominated in these for these kinds of awards. So what are your thoughts on the Oscars? Do you like the wins? Did you like how it was hosted? What are your thoughts? How many of the Best Picture nominees have you seen? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe for more content. I know I mostly talk about music, but occasionally I will throw in stuff about movies. And I will see you all in my next video. Please give this a like and subscribe please give this a like if you enjoyed. I'll see you all in my next video. Peace, love, and light. Bye.